So I'm glad to welcome both of you, Joshua Pittman from David Lynch Foundation and Brett Carter from Stress is Gone. So Joshua, if you would like to begin.
Sure thing. Thank you, Lisa. And welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Joshua Pittman. I'm a certified Transcendental Meditation teacher. Transcendental Meditation, or TM for short, is a very simple and natural technique, and it's very easy to learn, very easy to practice. Some of you may have tried different types of meditation before. A lot of people who come to learn TM, they say they've tried certain types and it worked when they were, already somewhat in a calm state, but when things were stressful, or if they were tired, or if they weren't in a good place, that they found it hard to do it or hard to get into it. One thing I like about TM is that it works every time. It's easy to do in the comfort of your own home, or if you're not at home, maybe you're in school, if you have a break in between classes, all you need to do is find a chair and a somewhat quiet place, free from interruption. So what I wanted to share with you today is what Transcendental Meditation is, how it differs from other forms of meditation, and a little bit about how it works. We teach Transcendental Meditation always in person. So it's not possible to do it over Zoom. It's a very simple technique, but also very systematic. So when I teach it, I always want to make sure that, that you're having the right experience and that you have the opportunity to ask any questions. It's a little bit more of a choose your own adventure. So it's not something that can just be done over video. You may have one specific question that someone else would be having a very different experience. So it's very much tailored to your individual experience. It's not like just, do this for everybody. It's not necessarily a one size fits all. It's very much tailored to each person's individual experience. So the way that it's taught is always in person. And I teach for the David Lynch Foundation, which is an organization set up here in New York. We have our office in Midtown on around Grand Central. We also have offices in DC, Chicago, and LA. And the focus of the David Lynch Foundation is to bring this technique to people who are suffering from high levels of stress. So definitely applicable to veterans, also very highly applicable for students. So college students are under a lot of stress and pressure. And where does that stress go? We just store it and accumulate it, and we need to have some release for it, right? We know there are different ways that we could release stress, sometimes healthy ways, sometimes not such healthy ways. We know we could run to release stress. We know we could box to release stress. And then we have to ask the question, is that really releasing stress, or is it just kind of taking our mind off of it? Exercise is important. It does increase endorphins. It can increase our feel-good hormone. But what about the stress that has been accumulated? Does running really get rid of that? Does watching Netflix release that stress? Or does it just take our mind off of it? What is necessary in order to release stress? Is it just in our mind? Is stress just a mental thing that, a certain way that we feel? Or does it get stored in a certain way? And, if we look back to the original definition of stress, originally it was an engineering term, right? Stress in engineering is how much pressure a material can take. Let's say a metal rod, how much pressure that can take before it snaps. Now, if we look at the machinery of our body and the machinery of our nervous system, we know that we can take a certain amount of pressure. We know that we can take a certain amount of stress before we succumb to it, before we start to feel it. So our body, we could say, stores the stress. And there's a lot of books, there's a lot of science behind this, how the body and the nervous system actually respond to stress. And that could be environmental stress, right? Going through military training, would you say is very stressful, right? If we go through that intense pressure, maybe affecting our sleep schedule, any workout that we do, right, taxes the system. There's an increase of adrenaline. There's an increase of cortisol when we're under a high stress situation. And where does that go? It gets stored in the physiology, right? Think about it. Where do you store stress? Do you feel it mentally? Do you feel it in your head, right? Do you get headaches? Do you feel muscle tension, neck, shoulder, back? So we could say that stress really is caused by any overload of experience, whether that's mental overload, right? Being under a lot of pressure at work. Maybe you're, going through finals, right? Maybe it's physical, right? Overwork, injury. Stress is stored, whether it's mental, emotional, or physical. It's always stored physically. And that can be seen in the brain. It can also be seen in the body. And therefore, there must be something done in order to heal or release that stress. If you go to the doctor, they notice. You go to a psychiatrist, what are they going to do? If you're feeling anxious or angry or depressed, they're not just going to tell you to relax or, hey, cheer up, but they're going to give you some medicine, right? Because the medicine can affect the physiology. It affects the stress hormones, right, in the brain and in the bloodstream. So by affecting the body, you can affect the mind. Now, with meditation, what we do is we take the mental approach because the mind is more abstract. It's easier to maneuver or manipulate than the body. You can get a massage. That'll give you relaxation. And that can help to release stress a little bit. But really, it's the rest that the body needs in order to heal stress. How do we heal stress? The body does it. The body knows. We have a natural healing mechanism that when we're well rested, we should be able to fight off any bug that's going around, right? I know when I'm overworked, when I'm staying up late and waking up early, that's when I tend to catch a cold or get sick. But if I'm getting a good night's sleep, then I know I'm able to fight off any disease. So rest is important. Transcendental meditation provides a level of rest that is very profound, and it's a different quality of rest. By some measurements, it seems to be as deep or even deeper than sleep, the deepest point of sleep at night. So this is something that's very tangible and that you will feel, that the mind settles down to a very deep level of rest, and therefore the body settles down to a very deep level of rest. And therefore the body is able to heal itself very profoundly. Now, let's look at this word transcendental. Transcendental meditation. What does it mean to transcend? We know to transform or to transport, it means to go from one thing to another, right? To transcend means to go beyond. And in terms of meditation, in a mental technique, what we're doing is going beyond the surface, active thinking level of the mind. So I'd like to share an illustration, an analogy to illustrate this, what it means to transcend. We can liken our mind to the ocean. The ocean, we know, has different levels from the surface to the depth. What is the surface of the ocean like? Here we see the waves on the ocean. And whether it's a low tide with just quiet ripples, or it's high tide or storm on the surface, waves can be quiet or they can be very loud and active. There can be a hurricane on the surface of the ocean, tidal waves. What's it like underneath the surface? Is it just as active or is it a little calmer? Underneath the surface, there may be some tide, there may be some currents, but it's a little calmer. The deeper you go into the ocean, the quieter it is. If you were scuba diving or if you were in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean, you would see that it's very calm and peaceful. And even if there's a storm on the surface, you would not notice it, you would not be affected. bottom of the ocean. How does that relate to our mind? You ever feel that there's a storm in your mind? You ever feel that your thoughts are hyperactive, that the mind is racing, and you wish you can just get away from that? That's just the surface of the mind. All of us have a capacity to experience calmer levels of thinking, calmer levels of awareness. Just like a diver dives down from the ocean surface to the depth, our mind has the capacity to experience quieter, calmer levels of thinking. And you may have had some experience of that at some point in your life. Maybe on Sunday morning when you wake up, you don't have a class to run to, you don't have work to get to, you just wake up naturally and things are calm. That's an experience of a quieter level of thinking. Where do our thoughts come from? Our thoughts, we could say, are kind of like bubbles in the mind. A bubble forms at the ocean floor, and that bubble rises up to the surface, where it pops. Our thoughts are like that. They come from deep inside. A thought starts as an idea, and that idea becomes a little clearer, becomes a little more concrete, and then it pops into your awareness, where you recognize it as such, where you recognize it as a thought. Now, what transcendental meditation does is a specific, systematic technique to experience thought at more fundamental levels, to experience thought at subtler, earlier stages. And for that, we use a specific thought, something we can call in the tradition where transcendental meditation comes from, the Vedic tradition, called a mantra. And this is something that your teacher will provide, will instruct you. A mantra is a sound or word without meaning. And what happens is the mind starts to experience that mantra automatically at subtler, deeper levels, drawing the attention within, settling the mind, at the same time settling the body from the surface to the depth, where you may transcend thought altogether and experience a state of mind which is calm, quiet, and peaceful. We call this pure consciousness or transcendental consciousness. And many meditations describe some experience like that. It's an experience of being, not doing, inner awareness. In order to be aware, usually we have to be aware of something. Normally that's something in the environment, awareness of our thought, or awareness of the person in front of us, awareness of some noise. Pure awareness is an experience of yourself. That screen of awareness, that subjectivity, your pure consciousness. And this happens very automatically, very naturally. It's done for 20 minutes, twice a day, sitting comfortably in a chair. You don't have to sit in any specific meditative posture. You don't have to sit on the floor with your legs crossed and your fingers in a position. It's an internal, silent technique. Anybody looking at you wouldn't know you're necessarily meditating. It looks like this. Very natural. I do it on the subway when I have a long commute. If you feel comfortable sitting with the eyes closed, you can meditate on the train. Noise, outside noise is not a barrier, does not intrude with the meditation. Normally I sit up in bed to meditate, sitting upright comfortably, 20 minutes twice a day, once in the morning when you wake up, and once again in the afternoon or early evening, as a preparation for activity. What transcending does, because it takes the mind away from that outward experience, from coarse thinking, from gross outward experiences, it gives the mind an opportunity to experience subtler, calmer, quieter levels of thinking. And on this level, it allows the mind, which is usually distracted and focused, to become more cohesive and coherent. It has a very specific effect on the brain. We know that there are different parts of the brain that do different things, right? We know that the left hemisphere of the brain is supposedly connected with our our right side, with our right hand. And that's supposed to be a little bit more of an analytical level of thinking, brain operation. Whereas the right side of the brain is supposed to be more creative, right? Some people, they say, are more creative. They use more of their right brain. Some people are more analytical. They say they use more of their left brain. What would it be like if we could use our total brain in a very coherent, cohesive, harmonious fashion? Transcending does this because it takes the mind away from focused, coarse, concrete thinking and gives it an experience of holistic awareness. It increases neuron connections throughout the entire brain. And we could see on the left side of the brain, the left side of this chart, that there's part of the brain that is connected at all times, depending on what we're doing. Now, you can see on the left side, there's a person sitting with their eyes closed. In this chart, it's looking from the top of the brain, and this top part here is the nose and the sides of the ears. And with the eyes closed, the back of the brain primarily is at rest, and therefore able to function in a more coherent way. Now, on the right side, you can see the huge difference. When a person is transcending, we create neuron connections throughout the entire brain. And this is something that you experience during transcendental meditation for that 20 minutes. And what happens when you open your eyes is it stays with you, maybe just for a couple minutes at first. And then you get back into that focused style of awareness, focused thinking. But as you continue over time, what happens is it sticks with you more and more. It grows more and more. It becomes habituated. Like anything, if you practice any art, music, or sport, you practice so you eventually don't have to think about it. You see primarily these connections in the transcending brain are in the front of the brain and in the back of the brain. Transcending enlivens coherence in the prefrontal cortex. You know what the prefrontal cortex does? It's our human brain. It's the part of the brain that allows us to think and plan, think morally, right? Animals don't so much have that. They just react. The middle and the back of the brain, the parietal lobes and the occipital lobes are our reaction, our senses, right? Our eyes, what we see through the eyes streams onto the back of the brain, and then we have some response. We move, we perform some action. The front of the brain is more of our thinking and planning brain. What happens to the brain when we're under stress? The prefrontal cortex shuts down. We don't have time to think or plan when we're in a stressful situation, right? How do we respond? We don't. We react. When we're under stress, the prefrontal cortex shuts down, and we have a fight or flight response. This is important when we're in a dangerous situation. If we're in danger, we don't have time to think about how we want to respond. We just react. Now, what about stress that's not dangerous? What about stress that's final? Pressure from a test, anxiety from living in New York City. It has the same effect on the brain as stress from a dangerous situation. So we find that sometimes we're in a state of heightened awareness, heightened fear, and this habituates too. Maybe you've built that up from military career, from being in school for 4 years, living in New York your whole life. That habituates that style of functioning. And what we find in the brains of highly stressed people is that stress response has been habituated. Now we'll look on the right side of this chart here. You'll see kind of holes or a kind of a what looks like Swiss cheese, and primarily in the front of the brain. This is the same kind of view that we're looking at from the bottom, in this case, of the brain. And what we see in the prefrontal cortex, the neuron connections have not been made. There's no metabolic activity in the prefrontal cortex, in this case, in the brain of a highly stressed individual. It doesn't mean there's actual holes in the brain, but there are these parts of the brain that are not so much engaged in day-to-day life. And we see this with very sometimes minimal stimulus. Someone looks at you the wrong way, someone steps on your shoe, someone bumps into you on the train, and we go into that fight or flight mode, right? You see fights breaking out sometimes for no reason, and a bystander says, "What's going on? Why are they fighting?" The guys, break it up. It's a misunderstanding. You can't talk them down because there's that stress response that's there. And it's a knee-jerk response, right? Compare that to the left side of the chart, a person who is less stressed, maybe who's been well rested and recovered from stress. A person who's been meditating actually is able to increase neuron connections in that part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. And you can actually reverse that. You can actually increase blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. Transcending does that. So this is something that we can do to heal our brain, something that we can do on a daily basis to reverse those stress patterns. And I invite questions. When we are back in the office, when we are back teaching, we're happy to share this technique with you all. And but at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Lisa, and I will just maybe put my email up here for a sec, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And you can also
Thank
reach
you,
me
Joshua.
through the CUNY Vet office. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you so much, Joshua. One of the questions that came in by text to me is the fact that right now we're in a temporary, this is early summer, so we're remote. Most offices are remote. We're about to get back into phase 2, 3, etc., with re-entering the workspace and places. But I know that there may not be any face-to-face trainings, and as you mentioned, to be truly introduced to TM, it can't be remote. So what can vets do for now? I know I've heard that there are veteran Zoom calls to meditate and so forth, but what can someone do? Say they see this recording and we're not able to do face-to-face yet. What can be provided that is helpful?
Sure. We do have a series of breathing exercises and something called pulse feeling, which gives a taste of this, which gives a sense of allowing the mind to settle down, bringing a self-referral experience to the mind, to draw the attention within. And this is something that can be learned and practiced as a preparation for meditation. And just because I know Brett has, I think, some of this to share with you as well. We can maybe do that on another program, or if we could set up another meeting, that would take a little longer time to share. But there is quite a lot that we can do. Diaphragmatic breathing is something you can look up online, and we're happy to teach that as well, which is a way of activating the parasympathetic nervous system in a way that compensates or helps to balance our, sorry, it looks like my Wi-Fi just dropped out, but hopefully you can still hear me.
Yes, we can.
Supports parasympathetic, supports the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is activated when we're very active or hyperactive or in a stress situation, whereas the parasympathetic nervous system.
Right. I think we just lost you a bit. Oh, good.
Sorry, it helps to recover from that. The parasympathetic nervous system is activated in when you do more deep breathing. And that is something we can share, and we do teach on our retreats. And we've been doing that at the Bronx VA. We had a 4-session course that we can start to share with CUNY vets as well.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. And that's called diaphragmatic breathing?
Diaphragmatic breathing is
Okay, good.
something that we do when we're more relaxed. It's breathing,
Okay.
allows breathing into the lower lobes of the lungs, which allows for more efficient oxygen absorption, right? It's the opposite of our stress breathing, which is very much up here in the upper lobes of the lungs, just upper lung breathing, which is very, quick breath. Pranayam from the Ayurveda and from the Vedic tradition is there are various processes of pranayam, which is maybe alternate nostril breathing that can help to settle the nervous system as well. And that's something that people can do and learn very simply and can practice on their own.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now I'll turn it over to Brett Cotter from Stress is Gone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Lisa. I just wanted to say 21 years ago, I got on to my path of meditation and things of that nature, really diving deep into stress relief. And the first step that I took was transcendental meditation. And still to this day, 21 years later, I use it and come back to it at times. So it's a very special technique. And that was like one of the best presentations I've ever seen on it my entire life. So Joshua, my hat goes off to you. That was awesome. And just to create or share a little analogy or a little illustration of what my life was like before meditation and before TM and before stress is gone, and then after meditation, right? So if you go to the beach on a rough day and you're sitting in the sand and the wind's blowing and the waves are crashing, it's loud, it's noisy, you could still find beauty in it for sure. And there's things to appreciate, but it can be overwhelming and overloading from like a sensory perspective of the sounds, the wind on your skin, the everything happening. And then my life after meditation was like going to a really calm lake, a lake that's so calm, the surface of the water is like a clear sheet of glass. And when you look in, you can see your reflection perfectly. And that's what, meditation has been for me for the last 21 years. And again, my hat goes off to Joshua for that great presentation, and also TM's amazing. So I just wanted to say that. My name is Brett Cotter. I'm the founder of Stress is Gone. I've been in the stress relief field for over 2 decades. I teach classes in corporations, schools. I've focused most of my career on helping folks let go of childhood traumas. I worked a lot with inner city kids with anger management, and then I also worked a lot with veterans who have been diagnosed with PTSD from combat trauma. And I'll share some of my free resources that everybody could use at the end of our time together. So from talking to Lisa, it sounded like some of the stressors that folks might be going through now are based on transitions. And that might be transitioning from a 2-year school to a 4-year school, or an undergraduate program to a graduate program, or embarking on a job search in a job market that doesn't have a lot of fruit on the trees. So I prepared a few slides that I want to bring you guys through. And if you're watching this webinar and you have a lot of things going on in the background, I encourage you to turn off the radio or the TV and put on some headphones and get into a nice quiet place so we could really connect together and go through this together. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to go to a presentation that I prepared last night, just from getting the email from Lisa. I wanted to share a few of my initial thoughts on how to handle transitions. So reducing stress and anxiety, tips for managing transitions. Okay. So if you're embarking on a transition and you're right at the doorstep of making a big decision, or you already made the decision and you're about to transition into that new step in your life and you're feeling nervous, I want you to express your stress. Okay, that's the first step, and I will have slides that go into each one of these tips. The next tip is calm your body to clear your mind. Once you relax the body, the mind and the emotions are going to clear. Okay, identify what you want, and more importantly than that is identifying why you want that. Okay, then visualize, plan, and execute. And then the last slide is going to contain a number of job search tips. I also have 20 years experience, well, over 20 now, closer to 25 years experience in technical recruiting. So I'm going to include a great resource at the end of this presentation that's going to give you over 100 tips that will help you focus your job search, brand your resume, and do great interviews as well. So the first tip we're going to discuss is identify your biggest fear. Okay, so if you're standing before this point in your life and you are about to be deployed, or you're going to grad school, or whatever the situation may be, and you could use this for the rest of your life, just express that biggest fear. Okay, is the biggest fear failure? Are you, afraid of making the wrong decision, taking the wrong step? Okay, just look inside and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of? Okay. After you find out what your biggest fear is, right, that's coming up for you in this initial state of transition, when you think about that fear, where do you feel the tension in your body? Do you feel it in your heart, in your stomach, in your throat, in your eyes? You want to identify the biggest fear and that area of tension in your body when you're thinking about that fear. Then you want to do some positive self-talk. And I know this is going to sound crazy to some people, but it's the first step in unlocking and releasing the tension. There's a lot to be said for the power of the spoken word. And this is really important when you pinpoint what your biggest fear is and where the tension is. The power of the spoken word can do some miraculous things. So after you've done those two things, I want you to say, right now I'm feeling fear around, and you would input your biggest fear there. I want to release this fear from wherever you're feeling it, right? The answer to question 2, let's say it's in your stomach. I want to release this fear from my stomach and replace that space inside me with clarity. Okay? So that's tip number 1, expressing your biggest fear when you're feeling nervous before a major transition in life. Right after you've done that exercise, okay? Now I want you to do stress stopper breath work that's going to help you calm down your body. Okay, so you have identified where the tension is, you identified the biggest fear, you just used the power of the spoken word to hopefully start to dislodge some of that fear, and now you're going to really find some deep relaxation from deep within your body by embracing the tension with your breath. And that's the key to the stress is gone technique and stress stopper breath work. So the first step, when you're feeling stress and anxiety at any point in your life, especially when you're embarking on a new transition, is touching the tension. Okay, for me, it's usually my chest. So I'm touching my chest, right? I start breathing deep and slow. And once per breath, I silently say the words to myself, I'm okay. All right, so what that looks like, right? If you're stressed out, you might be going for a quick walk in your backyard to express your stress. Then you touch the tension, start breathing deep and slow, silently saying, I'm okay, once per breath. So do that now 3 times. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. All right, great. Now that was only 3 times we did that. I recommend doing it for 2 to 3 minutes, and you actually feel the tension unlock from your chest or wherever you're feeling it. Excuse me. So we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, before we get into this, I want to guide you through a simple 3.5-minute meditation. Okay, so if you're sitting up and you're comfortable there, that's great. If you want to lie down and get a little rest, I encourage you to do that. So just get comfortable. Put one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly button. Start breathing deep and slow. Feeling the airflow as it enters the tip of your nose. Breathing deep and slow, following the airflow, allowing it to open up your sinuses, making each breath easier and easier to breathe. Breathing deep and slow, following that airflow, allowing it to unlock and release all the tension from behind your eyes. Breathing deeper and slower, following the airflow all the way to the back of your mind. Allowing the airflow to unlock and release all those thoughts and any tension inside your brain. Breathing a little deeper and a little slower, following the airflow down your throat, feeling the airflow fill up your lungs with life force in each and every breath. Following the airflow towards the center of your chest, unlocking and releasing all the tension from around your heart. Allowing that life force to move towards the center of your heart, unlocking and releasing all anxiety to a place where you are free. Breathing deep and slow, gently letting go. And you could start to wiggle your fingers and your toes, your knees and your elbows, your shoulders and your neck, and open up your eyes when you're ready. Okay, so I just wanted to take you all through a simple meditation to give you a taste of stressed out breath work and start to create some muscle memory. So when you use that simple 3-step technique of touching the tension, breathing deep and slow, and once per breath saying, I'm okay, your body responds to it right away. All right, now we'll jump back in to our third tip of handling stress and anxiety during times of transitions in our life. And right here, I want you to identify what you want and why. Okay, so we'll take this nice and slow as well. You just cleared your head. So the first thing says, with a clear head, close your eyes and look into your future. Ask yourself, what do I really want? So you can do that right now. What's most important to me? And if you don't have any sure answers right there, you could say to yourself, what I really want is, and see if your brain will fill in the blank. See if you get an image. Okay? Once you identified what you want, I want you to ask yourself, why do I want this? Okay? The answer to question 3 is really important. The reason why you want the thing is what you're really after. Okay? And that's what's going to bring you most happiness. All right? So I encourage you to do some soul searching and use this as a guide to do that, to identify what you really want, what you're really after, what's going to really make you most happy. Once you identified that, the 4th tip that I came up with last night was visualize, plan, and execute. Okay? So with your eyes closed again, with a calm body and a clear mind, I want you to visualize a few things. I want you to visualize what your life would be like, having what you truly desire, what you really want. What does your life look like? What does it feel like? What are you doing? Where are you? Who's next to you? Who are you impacting? What are you doing day to day? And what are you doing when you come home? From that life you desire, I want you to take 3 major life steps backwards in time to the life you have right now. And I want you to identify each step. So if you were really interested and you really desired to have a family and have your own home, right? The first step backwards might be buying the home or having kids. The next step backwards might be buying the home. The next step backwards might be getting married. The next step backwards might be meeting the right person to settle down with. Okay? So from your life right now, I want you to look at that first step. So in the example, it would be meeting the right person to settle down with. That's the next step towards your end goal, what would make you most happiness. And this is just an example. Now I want you to brainstorm all that needs to happen to successfully make the first major step forward, to meet that person that you want to settle down with. It might be, the first action might be, I got to get my shit together, or I have some things to work on, or I have some things I want to accomplish, and then I want to attract that relationship. Okay? So I want you to plan out the minimum actions required to complete that first major step, always keeping in mind the end goal to what you really want. And then you repeat that for the second step and the third major step, and include reasonable timelines to accomplishing those steps. And then to execute, all you got to do is take the first action of the first major life step towards the life you truly desire. Let the visualization of your desire be your guiding light, and inspiration and happiness will be the fuel for each of your action steps. All right, so now we'll move on to the next tip. The 5th tip has a bunch of job search tips. Okay, this comes from a blog post I wrote years ago. It has almost 100 job search tips, which encompass branding your resume, identifying 2 of your target jobs, focusing your job search, how to interact with online systems, and how to not get caught in the black hole in those online systems. And it also has a myriad of interviewing tips, phone interview tips, in-person interview tips, HR interview tips, tips specific for the hiring manager, tips for team members that you're interviewing with. So let's go through some of these. I've identified 4 major areas that I want to share with you today. So identify your bullseye. What does that mean? I want you to identify 2 target job titles and as you're confirming which 2 titles you're going for, I want you to make sure you meet the most common requirements for those jobs. So let's say you're looking for a job for a junior software engineer, all right? I want you to look at all the jobs, or a lot of those jobs, and look at the minimum requirements, the year's experience. You want to make sure that you meet the minimum experience necessary for both of your target jobs. It's very important. If you're applying for jobs that you don't meet the minimum requirements, your resume will never get screened by the resume screener, and it'll never get to the hiring manager. So you want to make sure you're applying to the right jobs. You could also use core competencies when you're crafting your resume. Now we'll get into brand your resume. You want to brand a resume specific for each target title, okay? Use the same buzzwords and phrases in your resume that appear in the target job descriptions. Okay, resume screeners scan your resume. They scan the summary, the job titles, and your responsibilities in about 5 to 6 seconds. And they're looking just for the buzzwords that they need for their jobs. So what I want you to do is make sure all those buzzwords for your target jobs appear in your summary, they appear in your title of your current job or your past jobs, and in the responsibilities bulleted in your current and your past positions. Okay, just make it easy for the resume screener. I've been in their shoes. I understand what they do, and I want you to use this information to your advantage. Then I want you to focus your job search, okay, and streamline it. Job sites, you could create profiles on all the major job sites. I recommend doing that, and configure your notifications so you get alerted once a new job title is posted that suits your qualifications, okay? I believe some of those job sites now have an automatic application that it automatically applies you to, which is great, okay? The next thing, company websites, applying directly to companies. I want you to scan different news media's platforms for companies that are doing awesome in this climate. For every 100 companies that are tanking, there's one company that's doing great. And I want you to find out who and where those companies are. You go onto their websites and they are hiring. Okay, so you have to find the companies that are making a lot of money in this crazy environment that we live in right now. Okay, the economy's turned upside down, but there are a few companies that are doing really well. So you got to find those companies, go on their websites, their career pages, and apply to the positions that are open where you meet the minimum qualifications, okay? Then follow up, all right? Whether it's an application to a job site or a company website, I want you to follow up. How do you do that? You call the company's main line, you ask for HR, then you ask for recruiting. Then you ask for the recruiter supporting the business unit that you applied to, okay? If you're a sales and marketing person, say, I need to speak with the sales and marketing recruiter. If you're a technical person, say, I need to speak with the technical recruiter that's supporting the IT department. All right. Once you get through to them, right, once you get them on the phone live, you're going to do a professional introduction, introducing yourself, mention your name, your title, and the job title you applied for. All right. And you're going to also mention how many years experience you have with the required skills, and that you're very interested in the company and you're happy to answer any questions that they might have about your background at their leisure, okay? And then just listen to hear what they say. They might say, listen, I can't talk right now. They might start asking you questions, but just listen, show that you're a good listener, and take the conversation where it goes. If they can't talk now, just ask them what's a good time to follow up, all right? And stay out of the black hole. Okay, what does that mean? In companies, they have their online recruiting system, right? I would say 85% of the candidates that apply go into the black hole, which means they never got their resume screened and the hiring manager never saw it, okay? So how do you want to avoid that? What I want you to do is apply immediately when the job opens up. That's why you're going to create those profiles that notify you once the new job's open. And you want to make sure you're applying for the right job. You're not going to list a salary that is above the salary cap. You might be saying, well, what if I don't know the salary cap? List a reasonable salary. Okay, do a salary search for the market and the job title you're looking at. Okay, a lot of people will throw out a high number on this application, and that will take them out of the running. They'll be flagged and their resume will not be opened by the resume screener. Complete all the questions. This is very annoying to recruiters and companies. When somebody writes, see resume, right? There's like a bunch of questions that the application might be asking you, and then you just say, see resume, see resume. It's so annoying. No one's gonna open your resume. Don't do that, okay? Write in the answers. Just write a quick summary of the answer. Final step is use LinkedIn to see if you have any connections, okay, at those companies. You might have somebody that you've known 10 years ago or worked with that's at the company that you could reach out to and see if they know the hiring manager, see if they know the recruiter, see if they could send your resume over as well. When multiple touch points happen on job search within a company, that behooves you, okay? So use all the resources you got. Speaking of resources, our resources for you are the Stress Is Gone mobile app, okay? We also have a mobile app called PTSD Free. They're both very similar, have the same functionality. It predicts and shuts down your stress reactions, okay? It helps configure your whole meditation practice, and it keeps you honest with it. It sends you reminders before it's time to meditate. And I feel that's half the challenge with meditating. And then it also helps you surface and process the traumatic memories from previous times in your life that fuel your everyday stress, okay? We also have a workbook for veterans. It's called The 3 Keys to Managing PTSD, The Warrior's Guide to Overcoming Combat Trauma. It's an amazing workbook. There's a free link to the free download there. It's on a PDF online, or you could purchase it on Amazon for $22. Then we have guided meditations on our YouTube channel. There's a bunch of them listed there, and there's going to be more. We also have a live guided meditation every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. All you got to do is download the Ring Central Meetings app, and the meeting ID is 582-811-3947. Okay. There's also a live link you see here. More tips, resume writing, job search, and interviewing. I suggest you right-click that link and open up the hyperlink, okay? It's an old blog that I wrote, well, I guess about 10 years ago. It's amazing. It helps you do great on interviews, get to the right interviews, brand your resume, helps you prepare for the interviews, and helps you knock the ball out of the park once you're in the seat in the interview. It also helps you negotiate good offers. And then finally, you could go to stressisgone.org for all of these resources. And let's see, that is it for me. It was an honor being here with you guys, all the men and women in Lisa's organization and all the student veterans that she supports. Love you guys. God bless you guys and girls. And such a noble, honorable path you chose in life. And if there's anything I could ever do, any of my resources, that live meditation class, I also do live coaching. Feel free to hit me up on the website, stressisgone.org. All right, God bless, stay safe. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. And we will be contacting you again in case some of our student veteran clubs would like to reach out to you once we're back on campus, or even virtually before that takes place. But thanks again, Brett.
Awesome.
Thank
And
you.
one last quick thing I wanted to mention. In about 3 weeks, we have a free course, How to Break Free from Anxiety. It's kind of like a video tutorial class, but if someone goes on to the stressisgone.org website and signs up for the newsletter, they'll get an email for the free course. Also on our Facebook page, the Stress Is Gone Facebook page, you'll be able to get it there too in about 3 weeks. So
That's good to know. Thank you.
Welcome.
And one quick question before we break up, before we end. I have a question that came in. Someone had followed up with a few interview leads for one company and had up to interview number 2, and COVID struck. And they literally received a message from the hiring manager that they could not proceed with interviewing for the position because they had to have an emergency COVID meeting for the company. How do they reintroduce themselves without being not abrasive, but creating an issue for anyone?
Sure. So to summarize the issue and how it affects companies, right, and especially
Mhm.
people that were in process, basically for the most part, what I've seen, I have a lot of friends that are in the industry for the last 25 years that run large recruiting firms.
Mhm.
Right now, the beat on the market is that the job market is like kind of like doors are shut, and I'll share why. Um, companies when COVID-19 hit, companies went into survival mode real quick. What they were focused on is getting their employees that they have there now home, working from home, and also they had to lay some people off. A lot of companies did. So hiring, all the open jobs that were officially open prior to COVID hitting immediately got frozen for the most part.
Mhm. Right.
Only one guy that I know that got hired after COVID hit.
Mm.
I'm talking like in small to large companies. There might be some other hiring going on in like services industry, but I typically work in the IT side. In the IT field right now, audio video designers are big. Those are the guys that, or the girls that go in and set up Zoom for
Okay.
companies. So AV designers are huge. AV analysts are huge right now. That's the job that I see the most of.
Okay.
And then people on the back end, server side people that are setting up remote work sites for companies.
Mm.
Now, how do you approach a manager or an HR person that you are in contact with? I would send an email and, just checking in, kind of like casual and concerned, meaning, hey, I hope everything is, going okay for you and your loved ones. I just wanted to check in, given these challenging times. I am really interested in the company and the position. You can mention what interested you most about the company and the position, and you can
Okay.
mention, if you're talking to a hiring manager, if you are emailing a hiring manager, you can mention something that they said. So
Mm.
if he or she said something about benefits or something about the technology going to be using that you really liked, say I really loved when you mentioned this in our interview. Just wanted to know I'm still thinking of the job, and if you have any insight as to when things might reopen for this position, I would greatly appreciate it. Other than that, warmest regards to you and the team.
No, thank you so much. And this helps a lot. And again, we will be posting these video chat Wellness Wednesdays on our YouTube channel, and we plan to get everything more formalized. But again, we're all working remotely, and we really appreciate all the time and effort and insight that both you and Joshua provided for our veterans today.
Thanks so much for having us.